Okay, so let's dive in. We often talk about feminist progress, the big wins like more women in the workplace, more leaders. It seems like a pretty clear path forward.
Right.
But what if there's more to it? What if those wins, as important as they are, came with some hidden costs, things we haven't really accounted for?
Exactly. And that's a really fascinating question behind the article you shared, The Hidden Costs of Feminism in Work. It grabs you, doesn't it?
It really does. And just to be clear, we're not trying to downplay feminist achievements at all here.
Not at all. It's more about taking a critical look, using this article as a guide, at whether these advances were, well, purely liberating. Or if maybe they got tangled up with, the way our economy works in ways we didn't expect.
So our goal today is really to unpack that, right? The connection between feminist goals, work, and the capitalist system the article focuses on.
Yeah, to pull out some of those maybe surprising insights, the sort of counterintuitive sides of progress it talks about.
And I think this touches on something many people, maybe you listening, might feel. That feeling of striving for it all, the career, the family, the balance,
Yeah.
but still feeling, I don't know, overwhelmed.
Or like something's just not quite clicking.
Yes, that exact feeling. It really sets the scene for the article's main points.
Okay, so where does it start? It actually paints a picture of life before the big industrial shift.
Right, pre-industrial societies.
Yeah.
What was different then, according to the article?
Well, the big contrast it draws is with today's wage system. Back then, survival was much more of a community effort. Collaboration was key.
Okay.
And yes, there was a division of labor, often gendered, but the article suggests it was more about practicality. Who could physically do certain tasks, what the environment demanded, just basic survival needs. Less about the kind of strict hierarchies we see now.
So less about titles and bosses, more about everyone chipping in for the group.
Sort of, yeah. And the crucial point the article makes here is that this system, whatever its flaws by our standards today, it functioned without what it calls wage slavery.
Wage slavery, that's a heavy term. What's the article getting at there in that historical sense?
Well, in that context, it means people weren't legally owned, but they also weren't dependent on earning a wage just to survive, not in the same way. So there wasn't that same kind of economic compulsion forcing them into specific types of labor just to make ends meet.
Got it. But then everything changed with the Industrial Revolution,
Massively. Suddenly you have machines doing heavy labor.
which opened up new kinds of factory jobs women could do. And that was seen as huge progress, right?
Yeah.
Women entering the workforce.
Absolutely. A major step forward on the face of it. But this is where the article introduces a twist. It suggests this moment, this entry into industrial work, might have actually been the start of it calls it a repackaged form of enslavement.
Wow, okay. That sounds really counterintuitive. Progress as enslavement.
It does, and it taps into that idea that progress isn't always simple. The article actually quotes Hannah Arendt.
Oh,
He
yeah.
says something like, progress often demands more than it gives.
That's thought-provoking.
So the argument isn't that industrial jobs were bad per se, but that the reason women were integrated wasn't purely about liberation.
Okay, so what other motive does the article suggest?
Well, connecting the dots, it argues that corporations, the capitalist system, stood to gain massively.
Ah, right. Because suddenly you've basically doubled your potential workforce.
Exactly. More competition for jobs potentially drives down wages, definitely increases the total labor available to create profit.
The article mentions Sylvia Federici too, doesn't it? From Caliban and the Witch.
Yes, it brings in her perspective on how capitalism has historically kind of molded social roles, men's roles, women's roles specifically to get the most labor out of people.
So the unsettling idea here is that the push for workplace inclusion, which came from feminist struggles,
Might have also perfectly aligned with the needs of a growing capitalist economy, maybe in ways that weren't fully intended or seen at the time.
it suggests the system was ready to absorb that labor, not just for fairness, but for, well, profit.
Precisely. Federici's view, as presented, is that capitalism is adaptable. It shapes society for its own ends. And this leads straight into that whole pressure cooker of having it all.
Oh, yes. The myth of having it all. The article really digs into the pressure on women, doesn't it? Excel at work and manage the home front.
It talks about burnout, mental strain. It's intense.
There's that personal story from the author about their mother.
Yeah, that was powerful. Just the sheer exhaustion, the breakdowns from trying to keep all those plates spinning, it makes it very real.
Absolutely. It's not just an abstract idea then.
And it connects right to Arlie Hochschild's work, the concept of the second shift.
Right, the unpaid work waiting at home after the paid workday is done.
Exactly. And the article points out how societal norms just haven't caught up. We expect women offered to carry that second shift, even in dual income families.
Which links to this idea of choice the article explores.
Yes, the idea that feminism gave women choices, but the reality feels more like an obligation for many.
An obligation to work, and then also an obligation to handle most things at home, leading to guilt.
Huge amounts of guilt, especially it notes, for mothers, feeling like you're failing somewhere.
It mentions women crying on their commute. Just these little signs of the immense emotional toll.
Yeah. And then it asks that really sharp question, who benefits when we all feel like we're failing?
And the article's answer is pretty direct.
The capitalist system. It argues that this constant feeling of not being enough keeps people chasing, working harder, locked in.
That's a critical point. And it's interesting that the article doesn't stop there. It says men are also caught in this.
Right, it broadens the lens. Men are also trapped by different but equally rigid expectations.
Like the pressure to be the main provider, suppress emotions.
Yeah, that example about men at family gatherings maybe being less likely to, hold the baby. It uses that to illustrate how the system pushes these sort of uniform roles for everyone, limiting everybody in different ways.
So we're all kind of squeezed into boxes that serve the larger economic structure.
That's the argument. And this brings us back full circle to wage slavery.
Okay, so define that again, as the article presents it now in the modern context.
It's that contradiction.
No.
You're technically free. Nobody owns you. You can quit your job, but you're economically trapped. You need the wage to survive.
So your choices are constrained by economic necessity.
Exactly. And then it touches on politics, too, suggesting that sometimes political action can give us the illusion of change. Meaning it might feel like progress is happening, addressing symptoms, but maybe without changing the fundamental economic structures that cause the problems in the first place.
That's a challenging idea.
Yeah.
That political engagement might not always equal deep systemic transformation.
That definitely makes you pause and think about what real change looks like, which leads into the article section on reimagining freedom.
Okay, this sounds more hopeful. What does that involve?
Well, first, the author gets personal again, sharing their decision not to have kids. Not for lack of wanting them, but because they felt the current system is just too exhausting, too unsustainable for parents trying to do it all.
Wow, that's a statement.
It is. And then the article lays out this vision of what real freedom might look like.
Like what?
Things like, say, a 20-hour work week as standard. More time for family, for community, prioritizing mental health, creativity.
So shifting the focus away from pure productivity.
Entirely. It's about having the freedom not just to succeed within the current system, but the freedom to redefine the system itself.
That's a radical shift. Not just getting women a bigger piece of the pie, but baking a whole different pie.
You could put it that way, yeah. A pie based on well-being, connection, maybe purpose beyond just output.
And it leaves us with some pretty big questions to chew on, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. They're designed to make you think. It asks, point blank, what if feminism was strategically commodified?
Oof. Challenging us to think if the movement's goals were kind of absorbed or co-opted by economic interests.
Right. And then when did productivity become our main measure of worth?
That one hits home in our always-on culture.
For sure. And finally, how can we reclaim agency in a system designed to exhaust us?
That's the call to action almost. How do we find control and meaning within this?
Exactly. It's an invitation to really reflect.
So pulling this all together from our deep dives today, based on that article, there's this really core tension between the undeniable progress feminism has brought and the possibility that some of those gains got tangled up with capitalism in ways that created new pressures, new kinds of exhaustion.
Yeah, even while giving the appearance of more freedom, more empowerment, the article really pushes us to look under the surface.
It shows that progress isn't always linear or simple. It can have these complex, unintended side effects.
Absolutely. It's a call to look critically at the systems we live and work in.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to consider. Building on the article's conclusion, in this world that constantly tells us our worth is tied to how productive we are, What would truly fulfilling freedom actually look like for you?
It's a big question.
It is something to really mull over. How do these ideas about work, feminism, pressure, and freedom connect with your own life and what you value?